Speaking with the CEO of the financial derivatives company, Mr. Bismarck Rewani, on the 2018 budget draft, he touches extensively on the assumptions of the budget and what the federal government should do.
The implication of a higher oil price than budgeted is that your debt service requirements and your debt service burden will reduce, because your revenue will be higher than you anticipated, and therefore your borrowing will be reduced. Two things happen. Either you reduce the amount of debt because you have increased your revenue, or you pass a supplementary budget to increase your expenditure. My view is that at 8.6 trillion naira total expenditure, that amount is too modest to have an impact on this economy. If you are going to actually have an accelerated path out of the recession, you need to spend nothing less than about 30 or 40% higher than what you spent last year. In other words, I'm saying that you should spend a minimum of 11 trillion naira, not 8.6 trillion naira. The other question is that, okay, if you say spend 11 trillion naira, it's easy to say that. How do I fund it? No, you will fund it by selective and strategic borrowing, project-related borrowing. I think that's the key. Because if you spend 8.6 trillion naira, which is 15.7% higher than that which you spent in 2017, and inflation was 16% in 2017, effectively you have actually increased your expenditure by zero, because the rate of inflation was even slightly higher than the rate of increase in your expenditure. That is not going to have any impact. What the people of Nigeria are asking for today is, one, we have no problem with your policies, but the policies must have an impact to make life more bearable for us, to give us hope that the future is going to be better than the past.
On the excess crude account, which currently holds around $2.6 billion, he says such an account should be utilized properly for better impact on the total budget.
What the governors are saying in a very perverse and probably dysfunctional way is that, look, why save when you have items that are begging for attention in terms of expenditure, in terms of investment? That is what they are saying. Because the excess crude account at one point got up all the way to $22 billion, now down to $2 billion. Does it make sense to be saving money when there are projects that are begging? The answer to that is that two things. One, is there the absorptive capacity, right, of the economy to take these things? And I keep on using the word economic indigestion, that if you put too much money in too short a period, both for consumption, expenditure, and investment, you might actually lead to some type of constipation. On the other hand, if it is targeted and programmed strategically, you can do this, you can commit these resources to projects that are beyond 1 year so that it continues growing, so that it will have an impact. So on one hand, I do not agree that the excess crude account should be scrapped. I'm only saying that if the excess crude account is used to finance projects specifically, which cross budgetary timelines, then we'll have the same impact. The beneficiary of this spending or this investment will be the public and you and I, including the government.
Talking about the 2018 electioneering year and the budget's impact, he believes the government will deliver on its promises because it will be used as campaign strategy ahead of the 2019 elections.
It could be distractionary, not destruction, distractionary. You are running the government at the same time as campaigning to renew your mandate. But renewal of mandate is important because if you have lost your way and you've lost contact with your electoral base, then the election process brings you back to the base, brings you back to reality, and makes you go back to the promises you made last time and try to implement them. We are beginning to see a much more urgent, a much more aware, a much more responsive APC government because they are now aware that people are beginning to ask questions. You promised change. You promised a better life. You promised all of these things. It's time to deliver. That's the beauty of democracy, and that's the beauty of elections. So this government is becoming more efficient, becoming more proactive, in fact, more strategic, because it's time to go back to the electorate to tell them to answer for the votes of 2015.
Also, we visited the Director General of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Mr. Muda Yusuf. He bases his facts on the oil subsidy, which is not properly spelt out in the 2018 budget proposal. This, he believes, will definitely have a negative impact on the budget.
There are some critical expenditure items that one expects should have been reflected in the budget, but which are currently not reflected. First is the subsidy. As we speak, the oil marketers claim that the government is owing them 800 billion naira for subsidy. There was some initial steps taken to issue promissory notes and all of that, which also needed the consent of the National Assembly. That has not been mentioned. That is for 2017. For 2018, especially now that oil prices are going up, subsidy is also likely to go up. So what budgetary provision are we making for that? That is important. So that you don't have issues around the National Assembly saying that subsidy is being spent, and subsidy funds sometimes go as high as R1 trillion. There has to be proper appropriation framework for it. Then there are issues of contractual arrears. There are reports that contractual arrears in this economy at the federal level could be as high as 2 trillion naira. There must be a framework for the payment of the contractual arrears. Because the bulk of what we see in debt service are just debt service relating to treasury-based and federal government bonds and external borrowing. Not so much contractual arrears. That also needs to be properly captured so that we have an inclusive appropriation document that captures all the key expenditure items of government. So these things are very important.
The LCCI boss is worried about the ambitious projections in the draft document. Mr. Yusuf reveals that the non-oil revenue will be a great challenge in terms of revenue generation.
Once there is a commitment to ensure that all these issues of timing are dealt with, issues of process, issues of procurement, issues of releases, once we're able to deal with all those issues, I think that will reduce the implementation risk. And of course, we have the issue of revenue assumptions. Once our expectations are not too optimistic, once our expectations and assumptions are realistic, that will also affect the quality of implementation of the budget. It is when your assumptions are not realistic, that is when you begin to have issues with budget implementation, because you don't have the revenue to fund the budget, and you have a bloated budget and there's serious revenue shortfall. Of course, it will affect implementation. So the extent to which the assumptions are realistic, I think, will help to also ensure that the budgets are implemented the way they should be.
We also sought the opinion of a financial analyst, Mr. Mike, on a possible oil price dip on the $45 per barrel oil price within the 2018 budget proposal.
That's something that actually happened very briefly in 2017. The budget benchmark for oil price was $44.50 barrels. Around May, June, July, we saw oil prices dip to about $44, so not that different. But what really matters isn't necessarily the spot price of oil at any point. It's more the average for the year. So as long as the average for the year trades above $45 a barrel, we should be in good shape. And what that should translate to is federal government oil earnings coming in as projected, or perhaps even higher.
The financial analyst insists that if the 2018 budget proposal is properly implemented, it will have a really positive impact on the man on the street.
There's two angles to look at the political influence from. One is that generally, when elections are coming, politicians and governments are generally a bit more disciplined around the world, as they know that voters are looking at projects and voters are looking at the state of the economy to determine if they have done a good job. At the same time, depending on the nature of elections, sometimes you do see funds being diverted away from positive projects towards more electioneering, right? And that can have an impact on the implementation of the budget, in the sense that the federal government can still spend 8 trillion naira, but not on the intended projects and more on election-related spending. So those forces are sort of competing, and it will probably come down to how the elections pan out, specifically how competitive they are.
It's believed if the federal government's 2018 budget proposal is passed early in January, the implementation within 11 months will surpass the previous budget and will improve the economy.